All right, the second half of this is just all the properties that you need to know. First one is the commutative property of addition, which is saying if we have a plus b, that is the same thing as b plus a. For example, if we said 3 plus 4, that's the same thing as 4 plus 3. And again, when you commute, you kind of rearrange. You go from point A to point B and then back from point B to point A. So the order changes. Okay, the order changes there. That's what you want to think about. Commutative property of multiplication is very similar. If we have A times B, it's the same thing as B times A. If we had 3 times 4, that's the same thing as 4 times 3. The associative property of addition has to do with grouping. So I'm going to say A plus B plus C. And if we group these two together, the A plus B, that does not change the outcome if we group these together. So if we associate, associative property, A plus B in the first one and B plus C in the second one, it does not change a thing. So I'm going to say 3 plus 4 plus 5. We group the first two terms. It does not change the outcome if we group the last two. Multiplication is the same way. If we have A times B times C, and again, this is just the grouping. A times B versus B times C, they are identical. And we could say 3 times 4 times 5. We group the first two terms versus grouping the last two terms. It's identical. Third property is the identity property. You want to think, what should I add or multiply to get the original? Meaning if I have A, what do I have to add to A to get it? Well, A plus 0 is A. So 0 is the identity for addition. So anytime you add 0 to something, you're going to get itself. Multiplication is the same way. What do I need to multiply A by to get A? Well, A times 1 is A. So 1 is the identity for multiplication. Fourth property in this is the inverse property. You want to think about, how do I undo? And by that, I mean, what do I have to add to A to undo it? So if I add negative A, I've undone that addition, and I get 0. So if I have 5, I'm going to add negative 5, and I get 0. That is the inverse property of addition. Multiplication is a little more complicated. We're assuming A is not 0. So if I say A, I'm going to multiply it by 1 over A, and that's going to give me 1. So if I have 5, I'm going to multiply it by 1 over 5, and that's going to give me 1. That is the multiplication, or the inverse property of multiplication. Last but not least is the one you're probably most familiar with, is the distributive property. I have A times B plus C. We know that that is AB plus AC. All we do is distribute that A to both terms. And you could also have written that something like A plus C times B, and that would be also be AB plus BC. Notice they're written in alphabetical order. All right, this next section asks us to identify the additive inverse and the multiplicative inverse. So first let's do the additive inverse for each of these. And again, the additive inverse, we're thinking here, how do I undo it? We're going to add the opposite sign. So if I have 7, the opposite sign would be -7. 4.5, the opposite sign would be a positive 4.5. For 3/4 would be a negative 3/4. Again, we're just taking the opposite sign. And for negative 6/7 would be positive 6/7. The second part of this is the multiplicative inverse. And again, this is just multiplying by the reciprocal. So the reciprocal of 7 would be 1/7. I'm going to skip the second one for a second. The third one, reciprocal of that would be 4/3. And the reciprocal of negative 6/7 would be negative 7/6. Now, let's take a look at this one. I've got to be able to write this as a fraction. If you were in doubt, you could write this as negative 45 over 10 and reduce. But really, you want to get to the point where you recognize that that is negative 9/2. So knowing that these two are the same, and I want to find the multiplicative inverse, I'm just going to take the reciprocal here, which is negative 2/9. All right, these next two, these are very similar to what you'll see on the test. See if you can pause the video right here and name the property that's described in these two expressions right here and right here. All right, this first one, it looks like we're distributing this. We're going from 2 times 3, and we're also doing 2 times root 5. So this is the distributive property. And this one over here, think about what's changing. The order is changing. So if it's order, that's always the commutative property. So I'm going to say this is the commutative property. And you always need to say, is it of addition or multiplication? In this case, this is of addition. All right, last few questions on this page. First one, it says to simplify these two expressions, we're going to distribute here. 4 times 3a is 12a. So we distributed that. We're going to also multiply it there. I get negative 4b plus 2b. And 2 times 3a would be 6a. I'm going to combine my like terms. I have 12 plus 6 a's. 12 plus 6 would be 18 a's. Negative 4b plus 2b is negative 2b. And there is my answer. If you wanted to factor around a 2, you could. And you could write it like that. All right, last one. We're going to multiply this out just like we did before. 2 times 3x is 6x. 2 times negative y is negative 2y. Be careful with this negative in front of the 4. I'm going to multiply negative 4 times 2x. I get negative 8x. Negative 4 times 3y is negative 12y. And again, just like we did on the previous problem, we're going to combine our like terms. 6x minus 8x is negative 2x. And negative 2y minus 12y is negative 14y. There is your answer. And again, I'd prefer you factor out the 2. There's a negative 2 here that we can factor out. And I get x plus 7y.